going on, y'all? This is Ars with a walkthrough for Beat Skills plugins. So today we're going to be talking about Vinylistik. It's a new VST drum machine that aims to bring that retro 90s flair, that crate digging, sampling, boom bap, hard-hitting drum sound that we all know and remember from the 90s and we love from the 90s. That's what this thing aims to do. So we're going to get right into it. So let's check this thing out. Vinylistik. Okay, so as always, I have Logic queued up, and this is Vinylistik. Now, I think the first thing you're going to notice when you take a look at this UI is its retro feel. I mean, they really brought that analog 90s drum machine feel to life with this user interface. You have the grayish tone and the wood grain sides, just really making it look like some real tough hardware. I love the grayish and brown aesthetic. It has a real rough feel to it, a rugged feel to it. It kind of really just makes you want to bang on those pads in real life, just like knock on the pads, just take it out the screen, put it down in front of you. You know, it really leaps right out of the screen at you when you start looking at it. And so diving in a little bit deeper, we can take a look at some of the features that you have here on the Vinylistik VST. Now, right here on the main interface, you have 8 different pad slots for 8 different samples. Each one of these pads houses a different sample. So, for example, on this one, you have your kick. On this pad, you have your snare. This pad, you have your hi-hat, another hi-hat, roll, a snare roll, a tom, another snare, another kick. And every single one of the kits that you load up in this thing comes with its own set of kicks, snares, hi-hats, cymbals, rolls. It all comes with it. So as you scroll through the presets, you'll notice that the samples for each one of the pads change. So for example, if I was to click this arrow down here and go to the next preset, you'll notice that the kick change, the snare change, the hi-hat changes. Every single time you go to a new preset, you can go to Bank B and click the Skippy kit. Every single time you change the kits, the kick, that's a really cool kick, the snares, the cymbals, the rim shot, all of that stuff changes, but you're not stuck and glued to the samples that are on each one of those pads. So if you wanted to, you can go right up here to this little circle on top of the pad and click whichever pad you want to change. Let's say you want to change this kick right here. You go over to the sample. Right here, it'll say the name of that sample. You click on it and you can just go and find the sample that you want to use and you can change it. It doesn't even have to be a sample that comes with the Vinylistik VST. You can go to any one of your folders inside of your hard drive and you can drag and drop any one of your one-shot kicks and one-shot snares from any one of your sample packs. You can load up the drums that you want and you can build your own kits. So let's just say, for example, I wanted to change this kick out. I could click right here, go to my backup hard drive, go to a folder that has a snare that I'm looking for. Let's say it's this one here. Just double click it, and now I've loaded that snare up on this pad. So I have these kicks and these snares from this preset kit, but I loaded up a new snare here. You don't even have to use the drop-down menu to change the snare. You could go to a folder yourself and just drag and drop it on any one of the pads you like. You notice they light up as I'm dragging the sample over it. Find the pad you want to drop it to, and you just drop it right there. And now that snare is loaded up. And then if you like the way your kit sounds, you can just hit this little box down here. This is your save, and you can save your preset how you want to save it, and it'll save into your user section down here. As you can see, I already have 2 kits already saved. It's that simple. You can drag and drop. You can manipulate the samples however you want. If you look over here, you have a volume section, a pan section, a pitch section, release, low cut and high cut. You have reverse over here. All of these knobs in this section here apply to each individual pad. So say, for example, we go to the kick right over here. We highlight the top of it. Say I change the volume, I lower the volume there. I take some of the highs off of it. And let's say I put the kick in reverse. I hit this reverse button right here. I can actually tell the sample where I want it to start. So you can use these faders right here to tell Vinylistik where you want to start and stop the sample. And any one of the changes that you make over here on the right side, whether it be the volume, the panning, the pitch, the release, the low cut or the high cut, any one of those changes, once you make those changes and go to the next pad, the settings are gonna reset and go to whatever the settings are for that pad. So over here, you notice the volume is at one place, and then when I go over to the snare, the volume changes. You don't want it to remain the same when you go over to the snare. You may want the snare to have a different sound altogether. So it's cool that anything you change over here on the right side kind of just applies to whatever pad you have highlighted. Now down here, you have your output volume, you have your EQ, which is your low, your mids, and your highs. You have a reverb section over here, and you can adjust the amount and the decay. And you have a compressor right here that you can make adjustments to. Now, this box right here does not apply to the individual pads. That box down there applies to all the pads. So that's like your universal controls down there. As I showed you earlier down here where it says Skippy, you hit this down arrow and you can access your preset kits. So Vinylistik already has a bunch of kits loaded up for you, and you can just access them and play them how you like. You can go over to Rust here. You can hear some of these samples, and then you can go over to the next kit, Moonstruck. And you can just hear how great these samples sound. The kicks still hit really hard, and that's because all of the samples were processed through hardware. So vintage samplers, high-end analog preamps, so it has that hard-hitting analog sound, that really crispy, hard-hitting sound that you get when you use a real drum machine. Up top here, you have your tempo, and it automatically adjusts to the tempo of whatever project you're working on. And this switch right here is your bypass switch, and this is your kit and sequencer buttons. Now, what I just showed you right here is the main page on the UI, but there's actually a built-in sequencer inside this drum machine, which makes it even doper because you can play with the sequencer, throw snares in wherever you want to throw them in, throw kicks in wherever you want to throw them in, and really build an entire drum loop inside the VST itself, and then just drag and drop the midis onto your DAW. So we're gonna click right here where it says sequencer, and that is gonna take you to the sequencer page. Now there's a lot going on inside of this sequencer, a lot to unpack. Inside this sequencer, you have 8 tracks, which are represented here on the left side. These are your 8 pads from the previous page. So these 8 pads here are represented on the left side of the screen in your sequencer page. So if you were to go through the presets, you'll notice that those pads change. Now right here is your sequencer, and it's a 32-step sequencer. So all up here, this 1 to 32 represents all the steps inside of your 32-step sequencer, and each one of these steps light up in sync with the tempo of your project. And you'll notice each step in the sequencer is highlighted as the beat moves along. And you can plug an extra kick in wherever you like in the sequencer. So add another kick here. You can take a kick out just by right-clicking. You can do the same thing with the snare. You can go to any one of the steps and just click on it, and it'll add an extra snare right there. Now, if you go over here to the left and you click on the actual sample itself, it's going to give you a drop-down menu, which is going to highlight your pitch, your note length, your velocity, your swing, your reverb, and your panning. You can really, really get creative and make this thing unique and make it your own just by small adjustments. So if we were to solo the kick section right here, just by hitting this S right here, actually, I'm gonna highlight a bunch of kicks right here. So I have all of the kicks highlighted right here, and I'm gonna change the velocity of the kick in each one of the steps, and you'll hear the changes that it makes. Or I can make everything the same velocity and just click and drag my mouse across. You can make these adjustments to any one of the samples on any one of the pads. You can really dive deep and really carve out your sound and make it exactly what you want it to be. Now, say I wanted to just clear out this whole entire sequencer. I just wanted to get rid of everything that's right here. You can just hit clear, and it'll clear out all of the highlighted steps so you can really start from scratch and really do your own thing with it. Now you can make adjustments to the sequencer, so you don't have to use all 32 steps. You could use 16 steps, and I'm gonna highlight some of the steps right here on the kick track. Now you notice the sequencer keeps moving forward after 16. If you wanted it to loop at 16, you just go over to the 16, click on it and highlight it, and the sequencer will loop at 16. So any one of these steps you highlight, say you highlight 24, it's gonna loop at 24. So that's how you can make your adjustments to where you want the loop to happen within the sequencer. Down here, you have your save button and your delete button, and you can click on this save button to save the patterns you create. And you have your Midi drop, which is really cool. Say you wanted to drag this pattern out onto your door. All you have to do is click right here where it says Midi drop, hold it, and drag it to the selected track. And now it's on that track. Now, after you drag and drop it on the selected track, don't forget to bypass the VST by just clicking this button right here and turning it off, just to make sure you're only getting playback from the door and not from the drum machine itself. I think the main thing that's really cool about this VST is just how intuitive every action is. Like, you don't even have to sit here and trigger every individual step in the sequencer by individually clicking each step. You could just click one and drag your mouse across and it'll highlight everything. Or you can right click and drag your mouse back the other direction and delete everything. Now over down here where it says 1/16, obviously you have your time division section. And over here is your pattern section. Now you'll notice I have Bank D highlighted and I have the kettle preset selected. Now if you click on the pattern for the kettle preset, you'll notice that there's another pattern right here. So you have more than one pattern for each preset. And you can also make your own patterns. So I'll add a few little changes here. And to say I wanted to save that new pattern that I created, all I have to do is go right over here where it shows this disc, hit on that, and you can save your preset pattern under whatever name you like, and it'll show up right here in one of the empty slots. So as you can already see, this thing is super user-friendly. Now, what I want to do right now is go through some of the sounds in this thing just so you can get an idea of some of the sounds that already come loaded up in this VST. So let's go through some of the sounds and see what's going on. That's one of the patterns. Go to another preset. Let's go to Bank B. Let's go to one more preset. Let's go to Bank C and let's go to Stylist. Like I said, a lot of presets, a lot of hard-hitting drums, a lot of 90s retro-sounding drums, and lots of room for you to drag and drop your own samples and utilize this thing solely as a sampler and a drum machine and just have a great time building your own patterns inside the built-in sequencer. So now I don't want to waste any more time. I want to use this thing. Let's get right into the cook-up. Let's do it. So the first thing we want to do is build our own pattern. Now, I use some of the default presets that came loaded up inside of Vinylistik, but I also drag and drop my own samples. I think a few hi-hats I drag and drop that kind of had a bit of a lo-fi kind of feel, just to make it a little bit more dirty sounding. So then we go over to the sequencer here, and you'll see I highlighted some of the steps in the sequencer. Now we have this raw sample hi-hat that I dragged and dropped onto the screen here, and I adjusted the timing of it. I kept the snare, kept the kick. We got the roll, the tom in there. Then we go over to sequencer, and you'll see I have some things highlighted here, some things plugged in. And this is the pattern that I came up with. Just so you can hear what's happening with the sample I drag and dropped. So that was the pattern that I created. Once I created the pattern here on sequencer, I went over to the main square, and right here, as you can see, I have them highlighted. All 6 of these tracks represent an instance of Vinylistik. So I just clicked right here where it said Midi drop. I dragged and I dropped to each one of these tracks. And once I drag and dropped them, I just deleted the parts of the Midi that I didn't want playing on that track. So for instance, I drag and drop this right here, and I would double click and I'd go in, and the only thing I wanted to play on that track was this hi-hat right there, and I deleted everything but that hi-hat, and that's the only thing that would play on that track. And I pretty much did that for every single track in the beat. I'm gonna just solo the drums so you can hear it. After that, I built around that drum pattern. I went to a few other VSTs and added some instrumentation. And this is the track that I came up with using Vinylistik. All of the drums you hear in this thing were created using Vinylistik. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna bring an instance of Vinylistik up on the screen here, and we are going to play this track. Now, like I said, this is the beat I made using Vinylistik. Let's check it out and see how this thing sounds. And that's it. That's how easy and simple it is. Just going right over to the sequencer and plugging in those sounds all throughout the sequencer and building the entire skeleton of a track right inside the Vinylistik VST. Have fun banging out those beats and enjoy.